Hi, this video will demonstrate how to balance your camera on the NEXt-Gimbal. This example here is the NEXt-Gimbal with the 150mm wide tray. The first thing you have to do is take off the first nut from the screw that goes underneath the tray. This is what will secure the camera in place. Slide the nut up, so there's probably about maybe 6 to 7 mil of thread left at the top there. Balancing the gimbal with a 2-axis gimbal is really just a matter of making sure that the pitch is balanced and then followed by the yaw. This example here shows the version with the new etched measurement in millimeters. That just gives you a good guide for where you've ended up balancing the camera, so that you can keep a record of that in case it gets bumped or you change to a different camera. The same for the rear there. Once you've got it balanced, probably the easiest thing to do is just get your camera and your phone and just take a photograph of exactly how far back the camera sat and where the roll balance was positioned. The kit comes with a bunch of various size spacers. You've got 2mm, 2.5mm and a bunch of 0.5mm thick, as well as a rubber strip with a removable backing that is slightly tacky, which can stick to the bottom of the camera to stop it from sliding around. So to start with, in this example here I'm using a Sony NEX-6. It's got the power zoom lens. Any balancing you do has to be done with the lens turned on. So the camera has to be on with the lens extended, and I guess the zoom set to whatever zoom that you plan on using. So to start with, I'm going to take the backing off the rubber strip. And in my case here, the NEX has the screw hole to the, I guess, the left side of the bottom of the camera, so I'm just going to position this so that it kind of lines up with the holes. So in that case it'll be probably the second right hole there. So I'll just stick that to the bottom of the camera. It's not very tacky, so it's very easy to remove. So I'm just going to start with the thickness of that rubber strip. Now in my case it probably will go up another couple of millimeters or more to get the vertical balance correct, but I'm not going to worry about the vertical balance to start with. I'm going to worry about the fore-aft balance, basically how far back the camera is going to sit on this tray. So with that in position, I'll work out pretty much where I'm going to place the camera centrally. You'll end up with a particular slot that works for you. In this case it's the second slot from the right. If you find that the slot isn't quite right, you can actually remove the bottom tray by pulling the pegs out and flipping the tray over, and that gives you maybe a couple of millimeter difference in the position of the slot. So I'll start basically maybe around that sort of position there. It probably won't be right, most likely won't be. But I'll take that screw and I'll just screw it in as far as it'll go from the base. These screws are really designed for attaching, say, a camera to a flash, a hot shoe or something like that, or some device to a hot shoe. But it's actually quite convenient because you can tighten it in as far as it'll go and then use the nut, to tighten it off. So I'm going to turn my camera on so that I've got the lens out. And then I'm holding the pitch and I'm releasing it. I can see, oh blimey, it's rear heavy. So I need to slide the whole camera forward. So I just simply loosen that nut and slide the camera forward. In this case I'll slide it forward about maybe 5 or 6 mil, making sure the camera's reasonably straight. Let's try that again. Well, now we're front heavy, so we need to move it back just incrementally. Tighten the nut off again, holding the pitch. Just a little bit rear heavy. Actually, it's not too bad. Doesn't have to be perfect at this stage because we're going to come back to it. The next thing we need to do is work out the vertical balance. So trying to work out where the C of G of the camera is and make that the C of G of the gimbal. So at the moment, to do that, all you do is just point the camera straight down. And when I release it, it's just going to want to go straight back like that. That's because it's bottom heavy. So I've got the camera down too low on the tray. So what I've got to do is, first of all, make a note on that ruler where you've ended up. And by the looks of that, I'm just a smidge in front of 25 millimeters. Okay, so I'm looking at that ruler there, lining up with the rear of the camera and making a note of where the camera sits, because I have to take the camera off to put the additional spacers on to get the vertical balance right. So let's do that. So unscrew the screw completely out, holding onto the camera as tight as you can because you don't want to drop it. Now I'm going to start with maybe the 2mm spacer. Okay, make sure you've got it around the right way so it lines up with the holes, and then I'm going to place it on the tray, in between the camera and the tray. So I've got that spacer in there. I'll grab my screw, put it back through the hole there so that the space is held in place, tighten it in as far as it'll go, and then finish off with the nut. So I'm going to first of all straighten up that spacer, then I'm going to flip it over and have a look at the rear of the camera, where I had it before, which is just in front of 25, well actually just behind 25 because it's just under 25, it's probably sitting at about 24mm. So I'll tighten that again. So I've raised my camera up by 2mm. So now I'm going to do that vertical test again, pointing straight down and then releasing. Ah, hang on. Have I done it? 2mm thick spacer seems to be very close to where I need it to be. So to test whether I'm in the right spot right now, all I do is just move it to different angles and just release it. If it doesn't want to move, pointing it straight up. That's pretty accurate now for the pitch. So I've ended up using the rubber strip and a 2mm spacer for my Sony NEX. The side verticals here and here on the pitch, you can buy them in a slightly shorter version specifically for the Sony NEX-5. When you use those, you don't actually have to use any of those spacers to get the vertical balance right. But in this case I have a bigger camera, so I have to use the longer arms, the standard arms, standard length arms, or rather, I guess, verticals on the side. So that seems fairly balanced now on the pitch. That leaves the roll balance now. If I just release it, the roll's just going to fall straight down. Now, you probably can't see it from this angle, so I'm going to just change the angle. Okay. From this top angle, you'll see that there is a square plate that is helping to lock those 4 screws onto the roll motor. Also at the back plate here is a large wide slot. Now, you have to make sure that those 4 screws, which are M2.5 by 8mm long, are just loose enough so that you can actually slide the whole roll assembly on that slot. So I've just slid it back to the middle. Now, when I release it, it wants to roll to that side, so that side's heavy now, so I need to push it back again, just a fraction. And I've pretty much got the spot I need, which is quite fluky because it does take a few tries to get the right spot, but that does look right. It looks slightly heavy that side, so I'm just going to push it back just the smallest fraction. Yep, that's looking pretty good. I need to go back a fraction there. So you just want to make sure that you can move it to any angle and release it, and it should stay there. Now be aware there is magnetic cogging inside the motor itself, so if you release it fairly close to where a magnet is, it's going to pull it towards the magnet, so it'll look like it's moving, but it's actually just the cogging in the motor. So that's looking pretty good. Slightly heavy on the motor side. Okay, so when you're happy with that, you need to get a 2mm L-shaped hex screwdriver, and you tighten up those 4 screws. So here's my L-shaped 2mm hex shifter, and I'm going to tighten up those 4 screws at the back there. Don't go crazy tightening them up, just make sure that they're firm. And what this does is it actually makes the rear of the roll assembly a lot more rigid. So I'm just going to tighten those up. Okay, I'm going to make sure that my camera is perfectly straight, so I'm lining it up with the ruler that's on the camera tray, and I'm going to tighten up that nut at the base there as tight as it'll go. Yep. So now I'm ready to go. Now the next thing I suggest you do is take the gimbal, slide the gimbal off the dual rail, and you should adjust the center of gravity so that it's dead center with the interface plate that's at the top here. So we need to get the center of gravity of this whole gimbal and make sure it's dead center with the center of the interface plate there. So it's just really as simple. It doesn't have to be accurate, it just has to be a matter of getting close to it. So hold the interface by the center like that, and with it held in the center, just see if it tips forward or backwards. In this case it tips slightly forward, so probably the best thing to do is to slide, loosen the 4 bolts at the top here and slide that assembly slightly back. Okay, in my case I've ended up pretty much sliding the plate here almost to the very back. There's still probably about 3mm of tube at the back of that rear clamp. So now that's balanced. The other thing you need to make sure you do is try and line up the top of this plate here with the interface plate. So you look straight down the line of here, line it up with the top of the plate there so that the vertical is not twisted to the left or twisted to the right. So try and keep that completely vertical. Very different matter if you've got a third axis, because you've got to make sure that it's balanced that way or that way as well. So that's good to go now, and I'll tighten up those 4 bolts and reattach it to the multicopter, and then we can start setting up the gimbal control board.